The champagne glass slips from the elderly woman's fingers. Time stretches as the crystal catches the afternoon light, rotating once, twice, before it explodes against the stone tiles. Shards scatter like tiny stars falling to earth. The string quartet stops mid-note. 240 heads turn toward me. I stand at the edge of the rose arbor in a sage-green dress I bought from a thrift store bin 3 months ago. I had to cut the side seams open myself, sewing in panels of darker fabric just to accommodate my swollen belly. The dress is a patchwork of desperation. The shoes pinch my feet. The pearl studs in my ears are fake, purchased from a street vendor for $12. But the document in my hands is real. This is it. The moment I rehearsed in my bathroom mirror for 3 months. The moment they will all see me. My daughter kicks against my ribs like she knows what her mother is about to do. The September sun catches champagne flutes raised across 200 tables, a field of crystal I could never afford. The air smells of gardenias and old money. My palms are damp against the envelope, the paper worn soft from being clutched during panic attacks at 2 in the morning, from being hidden under my mattress like the evidence it is. At the altar, Preston Mercer III stands frozen. His face catches somewhere between recognition and horror, his mouth half open around a vow he will never finish speaking. Next to him, Serena Ashford is a vision in $12,000 of silk and imported lace, her veil trembling slightly in the breeze. She follows his gaze to me, and confusion crinkles her perfect features. In the front row, I find Cordelia Mercer, Preston's mother, the woman who offered me $200,000 to disappear. Her fingers dig into the armrests of her gilded chair, and even from 50 feet away, I can see the color drain from her face. She knows exactly who I am. She knows exactly what I carry. 2 security guards begin moving toward me from either side of the lawn. A murmur ripples through the guests, the kind of polite confusion that comes when something unprecedented interrupts a carefully controlled world. These people have never seen anything like me. A pregnant woman in a mended dress, standing uninvited at a wedding that costs more than she will earn in a decade. I have seconds before they remove me. I start walking toward the altar.
Friends, the bravest thing we can do is sometimes the simplest, to stand in the light and force others to see what they tried to bury. We often believe that power belongs to those with money, with connections, with family names that open doors. But there is another kind of power, the power of truth, the power of refusing to be erased. This story is about what happens when a secret refuses to stay hidden, no matter how much money tries to keep it in the dark. Welcome to the hearth. My name is Mr. Harlan, and tonight Iris Thornton shares with us the story of how she went from invisible to impossible to ignore. How a junior analyst from a small apartment in Queens walked into the wedding of the year and changed everything. If you believe in standing up for yourself even when the world tells you to stay silent, please subscribe and like this video. It helps these stories reach others who need them, and it means you become part of our Hearth family. Now, Iris, take us back to where this began.
Thank you, Mr. Harlan. To understand why I walked into that wedding, why I risked everything I had left, I need to take you back 14 months. Back to when I was nobody. I lived in a studio apartment with a window that looked out onto an air shaft and radiators that clanked all night long. My refrigerator held leftover takeout that was probably past its expiration date and half a bottle of white wine I had been nursing for 2 weeks. I worked 60 hours a week as a junior analyst at a financial consulting firm downtown. I made $52,000 a year. I had no boyfriend, no savings worth mentioning, and exactly 0 prospects for anything resembling a different life. Preston Mercer III was not supposed to exist in my world. Men like him lived in penthouses, dated socialites, and appeared in the business section of newspapers my firm used for research. They did not notice women like me. They looked right through us, the way you look through the person who refills your coffee or holds the elevator. But on that October morning, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, Preston Mercer III looked directly at me. The day I met him, I was invisible. By the time he was done with me, I wished I still was. The cafe across from my office was the kind of place that served overpriced lattes to people who pretended to enjoy them. I went there every Tuesday because it was quieter than the break room and because the baristas never tried to make conversation. That Tuesday in October, I was hunched over my laptop, editing a quarterly report that would never have my name on it, when he walked in. He wore a wrinkled Oxford with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, khaki pants that needed ironing, and scuffed leather shoes that looked like they had walked through a dozen rainstorms. Nothing about him screamed money. Nothing about him suggested he had ever seen the inside of a boardroom where decisions were made about people like me. The barista called out the order. "Presto?" I looked up from my screen. The white coffee cup sat on the counter, the name scrawled in black marker with that extra letter where it did not belong. A misspelling that would change my entire life. "Presto," I repeated aloud, before I could stop myself. A small laugh escaped my lips. He stopped mid-stride, turned. His eyes met mine, this deep amber color I had never seen before, flecked with gold near the pupils like sunlight caught in honey. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "Close enough," he said. "Mind if I sit?" I should have said no. Should have gestured to the laptop, the deadline, the 60-hour week waiting for me back at the office. I should have remembered that strangers did not just sit down with women like me, that handsome men with expensive watches did not strike up conversations in coffee shops outside of romantic comedies. Instead, I closed the screen. The table's free 3 hours disappeared like water through open fingers. He talked about sustainable architecture, about designing affordable housing that did not look like concrete punishment. He described his frustration with a family business that prioritized profit margins over the people who actually lived in their buildings. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers, leaning forward with his elbows on the table, his coffee growing cold between us. I noticed the watch, a vintage piece on his wrist, catching light as he gestured while describing his latest project. The leather band was worn soft from years of use, the face a quiet gold that did not demand attention. I registered it as expensive without understanding what expensive meant in his world. That watch was worth more than my student loans, more than 2 years of my salary, more than everything I owned combined. I saw it and thought, nice watch. I did not think, warning sign. The relationship developed over the following weeks. Morning coffees where he learned my order by heart. Oat milk latte, extra shot, no foam. He would have it waiting for me at our usual table, steam still rising from the cup when I walked through the door. Late-night phone calls where he listened more than he talked, asking about my childhood in Connecticut, my complicated relationship with my mother, my secret dream of writing a novel I would never finish. The day he helped me rehearse for my promotion interview, he played the part of my toughest critic. He asked questions designed to make me stumble, then coached me through the answers until I could deliver them without hesitation. When I got the promotion, he brought champagne to my apartment, the cheap kind from the bodega on the corner, because he said the expensive stuff was for people who cared more about labels than taste. That was when I caught myself thinking about a future with him. Mornings waking up next to him. Holidays spent together. A life that looked nothing like the one I had been living for 28 years. A small, quiet voice whispered that this felt too perfect, that men like this did not stumble into coffee shops and fall for women like me. I chose to ignore it. 6 weeks in, he took me to Brooklyn, a converted warehouse loft with a kitchen the size of a closet and windows that rattled every time the trains passed. Exposed brick covered the walls, stained by decades of city living. A mattress sat on the floor, books stacked against every available surface. A space that felt hidden from everything outside its walls. "This is where I actually live," he said, spreading his arms to encompass the modest space. "The penthouse is for my family, for appearances. This is for me." I ran my fingers along the brick, feeling the texture rough against my skin. "Why keep it secret?" He exhaled slowly, running his hand through his hair. "My mother is complicated. If she finds out about you before I am ready to stand up to her, she will destroy us. Not because you have done anything wrong." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Because you are not part of her blueprint." I should have asked what that meant. Should have demanded to know what kind of mother required hiding. What kind of family treated love like a threat to be neutralized. What kind of man kept the woman he claimed to care about locked away like a shameful secret. Instead, I kissed him. And I let the question die in my throat. For 4 months, he kept me hidden. He said it was for my protection, but I should have asked the harder question. Protected from what? Or from whom? The fire escape outside the Brooklyn apartment became our place. We would sit there on Sunday evenings, watching the Brooklyn Bridge glow, amber as the sun dropped behind Manhattan. The metal grating pressed cold lines into my legs. The sound of trains rattled through the neighborhood every 15 minutes, shaking the windows and drowning out our conversations in predictable intervals. That February evening, I had the pregnancy test tucked in my pocket. 2 pink lines. I had taken 3 tests over 2 days, then paid for a blood confirmation at my doctor's office because I could not believe it. Could not process that this was real. Could not understand how my life had changed so completely in the span of a single weekend. My hands trembled so badly, I hid them under my thighs, pressing my palms against the frozen metal until the cold numbed them. Preston sat beside me, oblivious, pointing out a ship moving slowly up the East River. He was talking about some project at work, some building his family was developing in Midtown, but I could not hear a word he said, over the pounding of my own heartbeat. Preston, my voice came out smaller than I intended. I'm pregnant. 7 seconds of silence. I counted each one. The ship continued its journey across the dark water. A train rumbled past somewhere below us, rattling the fire escape beneath our bodies. A dog barked in the distance. 3 sharp sounds that faded into nothing. You're sure? 3 tests. Blood work from my doctor. I'm sure. He exhaled slowly, running his fingers through his hair the way he did when he was processing something too big for immediate words. I watched his profile against the fading light, searching for panic, for anger, for the rejection I had prepared myself to receive. Then he turned to me, and something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not anger, something that looked almost like relief. This changes the timeline, he said. But maybe it's a sign. Maybe this is exactly what I needed to finally break free from all of it. From her. He kissed my forehead, pulled me close until I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. He smelled like coffee and the sandalwood soap he kept in the tiny bathroom. Give me 2 days, he said. I need to figure out how to do this right. How to protect you, protect us before I tell her. I'll call you with a plan. I believed him. I believed every word. 2 days passed. I checked my phone every hour, then every half hour, then every few minutes until the constant refreshing drained my battery twice. 3 days. His number went to voicemail. 4 days. Straight to voicemail, no rings at all. On the 5th day, a recorded message told me the number had been disconnected. I told myself there was an explanation, a family emergency, a phone lost or stolen, something that would make sense when he finally reached out, something that would explain why the man who had promised me a future had suddenly vanished from existence. On the 7th day, I took the train to Brooklyn. The apartment door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into emptiness. Bare floors where the mattress had been. Stripped walls with faded rectangles where his photographs once hung. The echo of my own footsteps bouncing off exposed brick. I walked through every room, opened every cabinet, checked every corner, called his name into the hollow space until my voice cracked. No furniture, no books, no trace he had ever lived there, not even a coffee cup in the trash. He had erased himself from existence as completely as if he had never been real at all. Desperation drove me to Mercer Holdings the next morning. The lobby was all marble and glass, designed to make people like me feel small. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, her smile polished and professional and utterly devoid of warmth. I need to see Preston Mercer. Do you have an appointment? No. But if you tell him Iris Thornton is here. Mr. Mercer is not accepting visitors without appointments. The smile never wavered. Perhaps you could send an email to his office. Please, just tell him I'm here. He'll want to see me. Her fingers moved to something beneath the desk. Security will escort you out. 2 men appeared at my sides within 30 seconds. Their uniforms were crisp, and their faces expressionless. They flanked me without touching, guiding me back across that endless marble floor. Every person in the lobby watched. Every eye followed me to the revolving doors. Every whispered conversation stopped as I passed. The emails bounced back undeliverable. The letters returned unopened, marked with stamps declaring the addressee unknown. I waited outside a restaurant in Tribeca, where I knew he had dinner reservations. Watched him walk past with a group of executives, laughing at something one of them said. I called his name across the sidewalk. He looked through me like I was transparent, like I did not exist. Kept walking without breaking stride. The voice in my head grew louder with each passing week. I was stupid to believe a billionaire would choose someone like me. The pregnancy was my burden alone, a consequence of my own foolishness, a cautionary tale other women would tell their daughters about trusting handsome strangers in coffee shops. I almost gave up, almost accepted that I was the fool in this story, the girl who believed in fairy tales and got exactly what she deserved. But then, alone in a sterile room with no one holding my hand, I heard something that changed everything. The 20-week ultrasound happened on a Thursday afternoon in a clinic on the Upper East Side. I lay on the examination table alone, paper crinkling beneath me with every breath. The ceiling tiles were stained with water damage in one corner, a brownish ring that looked like a continent on an old map. The room smelled like antiseptic and latex gloves. No hand to hold, no one to share this moment, just the technician beside me and the cold gel spreading across my stomach. "There's your baby's heart." The technician's voice was clinical and distant. She had done this 1,000 times. For her, it was routine. Another appointment in a day full of appointments. Another pregnant woman on a table. I turned my head toward the monitor. The image was grainy, shapes shifting in black and white like static from another world. And there, in the center of it all, was a tiny flutter, a heartbeat. Strong and steady and impossibly real. My daughter. Something broke inside me in that sterile room, but it was the right kind of breaking. The part of me that was willing to accept being erased, the part that had spent weeks believing I deserved this silence, this abandonment, the part that had accepted the shame others wanted me to carry, that I was the fool in someone else's cautionary tale, that this pregnancy was my burden to bear alone in quiet disgrace. That broken piece fell away, and what replaced it was something harder, something with edges, something that would not bend or break no matter how much pressure was applied. My daughter would know the truth. She would know her mother fought for her. She would know she was never a mistake, never a secret to be buried, never something shameful that needed hiding. She would know that when the world tried to make her mother invisible, her mother refused to disappear. No more waiting for Preston to come back. No more hoping for an explanation that would make this hurt less. No more checking my phone every hour for a message that would never arrive. I would find out what really happened, and I would make them answer for it. 3 days later, I found Renata Vega. Her office sat above a dry cleaner in the Bronx, accessed by a narrow staircase that smelled like fabric softener and stale cigarette smoke. The door was propped open with a phone book so old the pages had yellowed. I knocked twice on the frame and waited. "Come in." Renata was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a loose bun and reading glasses perched low on her nose. Her desk was buried under cold coffee cups and manila divorce files stacked 3 deep. A peeling sign on the wall behind her declared the office a smoke-free zone, completely ignored by the cigarette burning in a chipped ceramic ashtray beside her keyboard. "Sit," she said, without looking up from whatever document held her attention. I lowered myself into the only available chair, a vinyl thing with cracked armrests and stuffing coming loose at the seams. The springs groaned under my weight. I told her everything. The coffee shop, the hidden apartment in Brooklyn, the pregnancy test on the fire escape, the disappearance, the disconnected phone number, the marble lobby at Mercer Holdings and the security guards flanking me as I walked that endless floor. "I don't have money to pay a retainer," I admitted, my hands tight in my lap. "I have $52,000 a year and student loans." Renata finally looked up. She stared at me for a long moment, then pulled a file from the bottom of her stack. "My father worked for Mercer Holdings for 30 years, she said, tapping a cigarette against the desk. "Janitorial, night shift. They denied his pension 3 weeks before he died because of a paperwork error they created." She lit the cigarette. "You don't owe me a dime until we win, and we will win." "There's one more thing," I said, reaching into my purse. "I don't know if this helps, but..." "He left this..." I placed a plastic bag on her desk. Inside was a blue toothbrush, the one Preston had kept in my bathroom. the one I hadn't been able to throw away. Renata picked up the bag, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Honey," she said, "this doesn't just help. This is the bullet that takes them down."
There comes a moment in everyone's life when we choose. Do we accept the story others have written about us? Or do we pick up the pen ourselves? Iris picked up the pen. If this story is moving you, let me know. Subscribe so you do not miss how this unfolds. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to fight for your own truth?
She called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice different than before. Harder, more urgent. "You need to come to my office," she said, "and you need to sit down before I show you what I found." The manila folder she placed in front of me was thick with evidence, printed emails, surveillance photographs, financial records with highlighted transactions. Months of deception organized into sections with handwritten tabs marking each new betrayal. "It's worse than you thought," Renata said. She stubbed out her cigarette and immediately lit another. This wasn't a man getting cold feet. This wasn't family pressure or second thoughts. She opened the folder to the first page. This was a coordinated campaign to erase you from his life. And it started the day after you told him you were pregnant. I thought Preston had simply abandoned me, chose his money over our child, chose comfortable denial over the difficult truth, walked away because I was not worth the cost of fighting for. But I did not know that someone had built an entire fortress of lies. Brick by calculated brick, wall by manufactured wall, to make absolutely sure he never came back to me. I spread Renata's findings across my kitchen table, the surface disappearing beneath printed emails, surveillance photographs, and financial records. The folder was thick enough to break a spine. Every page revealed another layer of deception I never knew existed. Every document confirmed that the nightmare I had been living was not an accident, but a carefully constructed prison designed specifically for me. Cordelia Mercer had known about me within the first month. The photographs were date-stamped. Preston and me outside the coffee shop, his hand on my lower back as we walked. The two of us sitting on the fire escape in Brooklyn, my head resting on his shoulder as we watched the sunset. Entering his warehouse apartment together, my overnight bag slung across my body. Each image captured by investigators she had hired. She had watched us for months. Built a file. Waited. Instead of confronting Preston directly, Cordelia had played a longer game. She let the relationship develop. Let me fall deeper. Let me become something that would require surgical removal rather than a simple conversation. She had patience. She had resources. And she had absolutely no intention of allowing someone like me to derail her carefully constructed plans for her son's future. The day after I told Preston about the pregnancy, his mother summoned him to the Mercer estate. Renata had traced his movements through traffic cameras and credit card records. He left the Brooklyn apartment at 7:43 a.m., arrived at the estate in Greenwich at 9:12 a.m., did not leave until after midnight. Somewhere in those 17 hours, the man I loved was transformed into a stranger who would look through me on a street corner without blinking. When he emerged, everything had changed. The fabricated evidence was professional enough to fool anyone who wanted to believe it. Doctored photographs showing me with another man. A stranger's face digitally inserted beside mine, his arm around my waist in a restaurant I had never visited. Falsified bank records suggested I had been paid to seduce him. Deposits of $10,000 appearing in an account that did not belong to me. Time to coincide with each of our major relationship milestones. A paper trail of manufactured betrayal that painted me as a professional con artist who had targeted the Mercer fortune. A fake psychiatric evaluation claimed I had a history of targeting wealthy men. Fabricated therapy notes from a doctor who did not exist at a practice that had never operated. But the crown jewel was the paternity test. I held it in my hands, seeing the lie printed in black and white. Results claiming 0% probability. But how? Renata had the answer in the investigator's notes. Cordelia hadn't needed Preston to give a sample. She told him she had used DNA from his annual executive physical, a blood sample already on file with the family doctor. It was a lie, of course. She simply forged the document. But to Preston, it made perfect sense. His mother had access to everything. Why wouldn't she have access to his blood work? Cordelia had given Preston a choice. Believe the evidence. this mountain of proof that the woman he loved was a fraud carrying another man's child, and walk away clean, or stay with me and be disinherited, fired, and humiliated publicly. He chose to believe the lie, because the lie was safer. The cruel efficiency of it twisted something in my stomach. I found the society page announcement in Renata's folder, a clipping from the Times with a photograph that made me physically ill. Preston and Serena Ashford, photographed at a charity gala, their engagement announced to the world. The date on the article was exactly 6 days after I stopped existing in his life. I pushed back from the table and sat in silence for a long time, my hands pressed flat against the evidence of my own destruction. Then I picked up the phone and scheduled an appointment for prenatal DNA testing. Amniocentesis. The doctor warned me about the risks: infection, cramping, a small chance of complications that could harm the baby. I signed every form without hesitation. We had the baby's DNA from the amniocentesis. We had Preston's DNA from the toothbrush Renata had sent to the lab. The authentic paternity results arrived 3 weeks later. Preston Mercer III, 99.9% probability of paternity. The real numbers. The real truth. The weapon I needed. The wedding announcement came the same week. September 15th. The Hawthorne Estate. 240 guests. I ran the calculations in my head. A private confrontation would mean lawyers descending within hours. Cordelia had spent decades perfecting the art of making inconvenient truths vanish into silence. But 200 witnesses changed the equation. Reporters with cameras, guests with phones, society columnists hungry for scandal. There would be nowhere to hide. I did not pack a bag or write a speech. I just put on the sage green dress, the one I'd hacked apart and sewn back together to fit my shape. I tucked the evidence into the envelope I had been guarding for weeks, and I called a rideshare to the Hawthorne Estate. The iron gates of the Hawthorne Estate rose against the September sky like a promise I was about to break. Ivory columns flanked the entrance, draped in white organza that fluttered in the afternoon breeze. I counted my steps from the rideshare to the rose arbor. 312. The contrast between their world and mine had never been clearer. Women glided past in designer gowns worth more than my annual salary. Waiters circulated with champagne imported from France. Somewhere beyond the garden, a 7-tier cake flown in from Paris waited in a climate-controlled tent, and there I stood. A pregnant woman in a mended dress, carrying dynamite in a manila envelope. The string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon, the same piece Preston had once played for me on his grandmother's piano in the Brooklyn apartment, his fingers moving across the keys while I sat beside him on the bench, believing every lie he told me about our future. The memory felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, but I kept walking. I stepped onto the gravel path at 3:47 p.m., rose petals scattered along the white runner, impossibly pristine. Faces turned toward me as I walked. Confusion first, then recognition that something was wrong. The pregnant woman did not belong. The elderly woman in pearls dropped her champagne glass. Crystal exploded against the stone tiles. The quartet stopped mid-note. 240 heads turned toward the edge of the rose arbor where I stood, 7 months pregnant with the groom's child, holding proof of everything his mother had tried to bury. At the altar, Preston stood frozen, his face caught somewhere between recognition and horror, his mouth half open around the vow he would never finish speaking. I watched the color drain from his skin as our eyes met across that impossible distance. Beside him, Serena Ashford was a vision in silk and imported lace, her veil trembling slightly as confusion crept across her perfect features. Her eyes dropped to my belly, then back to my face, and I watched understanding begin to dawn. In the front row, Cordelia Mercer sat in a dove-gray suit with a corsage pinned to her lapel. Her fingers dug into the gilded armrests of her chair until the wood creaked beneath her grip. She knew exactly who I was. She knew exactly what I carried, and she knew that everything she had built was about to come crashing down. Preston's voice cracked the silence. "Iris, what are you?" "I'm here to return something that belongs to you." I crossed the remaining distance between us and placed the paternity results in his trembling hands. Official letterhead, damning numbers. The truth his mother had buried beneath a mountain of fabricated evidence. "Your daughter, the one your mother told you wasn't yours." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind across water. Phones emerged from pockets and clutches. The wedding photographer pivoted away from the altar, his lens finding the disaster unfolding before him. I opened the envelope and began laying evidence across the ceremonial table where the unity candles waited unlit. Printed emails detailing the surveillance operation, the doctored photographs, the fabricated bank records, the forged psychiatric evaluation. Everything she showed you was manufactured. The affair that never happened. The payments I never received. The paternity test that was falsified before the real one could ever be performed. Preston's face went gray. His hands trembled as he shuffled through the documents. "This isn't," my mother said. "Your mother lied." I kept my voice steady. "She told you she used your medical records for that test." "She didn't. She forged it. But this one? This one is real. It matches the DNA from the toothbrush you left in my bathroom, the one you forgot to erase." Cordelia rose from her seat, her face twisting into a sneer. "Oh, please. She forged that one too, Preston," Cordelia said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Just like she forged the bank records she's showing you. It's a desperate ploy from a desperate woman. Security. Get this trash out of here." Preston didn't look at his mother. He was staring at the photo attached to the DNA report, a picture of the evidence bag containing the toothbrush. "The blue one," he whispered. "With the rubber grip. I looked for that. I thought I lost it." He looked up at Iris, his eyes filling with tears. "You kept it?" "I couldn't throw it away," I said softly. He turned slowly to face his mother. The confusion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard realization. "You said you checked everything," Preston said, his voice shaking. "You said you erased every trace of me from that apartment." "I did what was necessary," Cordelia snapped. "Security." 2 guards stepped forward from the perimeter, moving fast. "No!" The scream didn't come from Preston. It came from Serena. She stood there, trembling, her face flushed not with embarrassment, but with pure, unadulterated rage. She turned to Preston, her eyes blazing. "You knew," she hissed. "Deep down, you knew she wasn't a liar. But you let your mother handle it because you were too weak to fight. Serena, please." "You liar!" She screamed the words right in his face, the sound echoing off the stone columns, raw and terrifying. She ripped the 7-carat diamond from her finger and hurled it at his chest with enough force that it left a red mark before bouncing into the grass. She didn't wait for an answer. She gathered her massive skirts in both hands and ran. She ran past the stunned guests, past the string quartet, screaming in fury as she fled toward the estate house, her veil tearing on a rose bush as she went. The ceremony collapsed into chaos. Guests surged to their feet. Voices overlapped in shock and disbelief. 200 phones captured every second from every angle. And for the first time in months, I was not invisible. Every eye in that garden saw me. Every person at that wedding knew my name. Every camera captured my face. But the truth I had delivered did not just expose Cordelia's lies. It destroyed everything in its path, including any hope I had of a simple ending. Within 72 hours, the story was everywhere. "Billionaire wedding crashed by pregnant ex" became the most searched headline in the country. Cordelia's history of manipulation dominated the coverage. Former employees came forward. A society reporter connected her to 3 other relationships Preston had tried to maintain before me, each one ending abruptly. The pattern was undeniable. I was not the first woman Cordelia Mercer had erased. I was simply the first one who refused to stay erased. Serena Ashford gave an exclusive interview to a morning show, sitting in a cream-colored armchair with perfect posture. She called herself a pawn in the Mercer family's social chess game. The interview went viral within hours. 6 days after the wedding, Preston appeared at my door. He wore the same wrinkled Oxford shirt from our first meeting, sleeves rolled to his elbows, as if he had tried to resurrect who he used to be. He had not shaved. Dark circles carved hollows beneath his eyes. "Can I come in?" I blocked the doorway with my body. "No." He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary. I resigned from Mercer Holdings, gave up my stake in the company, the inheritance, all of it. The words hung in the air between us. "Why?" "Because you were right." His voice cracked. "I chose the path where I did not have to be brave. I was a coward. I know that now." He pressed his palms against his eyes for a moment. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I do not deserve it. I just want to be there for our daughter, in whatever capacity you will allow. Even if that means sitting in a waiting room while you go to appointments alone. I studied his face, searching for the manipulation. I found only exhaustion and something that looked dangerously close to genuine remorse. I am not letting you in today, I said, or tomorrow, or next week. Trust isn't a light switch, Preston. It's a house you have to rebuild after you burned it down. I understand. There is a prenatal appointment next Thursday, 9 in the morning. You can sit in the waiting room. He nodded once, and I shut the door. He kept his word. Preston took a position at a nonprofit focused on affordable housing design. He rented a 2-bedroom apartment 3 blocks from mine. He showed up at every prenatal appointment, sat in the waiting room with a book, never pushing to come inside, never demanding more than I offered. For 3 months, he just sat there, waiting, proving he could stay even when it wasn't easy. Cora arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a full head of dark hair. Preston paced the hallway outside the delivery room for 11 hours. When the nurse finally let him in, she placed our daughter in his arms, and I watched his face transform. Tears ran down his cheeks as Cora's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. I do not know if I will ever fully trust you again, I said from the hospital bed, my voice hoarse. I do not know if we will ever be what we were before. He looked up from our daughter's face and he nodded. I'll wait, he said. However long it takes. And maybe, eventually, for us.
Justice is not always loud, friends. Sometimes it is simply standing in front of people who tried to erase you and saying, I exist. And so does the truth. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories like Iris's. And if you know someone who has been silenced, someone who has been made to feel invisible, share this with them. Let them know the truth does not forget. It waits.
We are not a fairy tale. Preston and I. We are something more complicated. A cautionary story about the lies families tell, the truths we bury, and the courage it takes to stand in front of 200 people and demand to be seen. My daughter will grow up knowing both her parents. She will know that her mother fought for her. She will know that her father made terrible choices and spent years trying to become worthy of forgiveness. She will know that love is not simple, that trust must be rebuilt brick by brick, and that some wounds leave scars even after they heal. The truth does not care about your timeline. It does not care about your 7-tier cakes or your 7-carat rings. It waits. And when it finally emerges, in a patched-together green dress, 7 months pregnant, holding a manila envelope that will shatter everything, it changes lives forever.